Hello everyone, my name is Christian and welcome to my hobby blog. I am very excited today to do the 8th review, or the 8th entry of the 31 Days of Japanese Films. And I'm very excited today because this is a director I have not covered yet on my channel really at all. And this is a director that I've seen 3, maybe 4 total works by. And I'm talking about Kan Ichikawa. And specifically, the film I'm talking about today is this film here from 1963, An Actor's Revenge. This is one of, if not the most awesome hidden gem of samurai films, in my opinion. Well, not samurai films, but of kabuki focused period pieces. And what I mean by that, of course, is the manner that it is shot. It is very kabuki focused, which has been a repeated theme throughout the series. And we also have really amazing characters, and on top of that, really interesting characters that exhibit a lot of different qualities that was not typically done in this genre. And I'm very excited to be talking about this today because this is a movie that I hadn't seen in a very long time. I remember looking for the magical Criterion C on the spine when I was at school, and this was one of the first, but not, it was definitely not the first sort of batch of Criterion titles that I'd found. But this is sort of earlier than it was later in my film collecting journey in school, probably 2017 before I graduated. But what the story is about is that this movie is set in the cloistered world of 19th century kabuki theater. The film charts a female impersonator's attempts to avenge the deaths of his parents, who were driven to insanity and suicide by a trio of corrupt men. And I'm not going to be able to recall specific details as well, because I had actually already filmed a review for this, and while it was processing, it crashed and the file got corrupted and I lost it. So I will be going a little more quickly in this video because I have another review that I need to film. And I've actually been gone all night. I just got back around 9 p.m. So I just wanted to throw that out as sort of a warning if there is anything that I am brushing over really quickly, or that I'm just not giving as much attention to than I usually would. But I will try to keep the standards high. But this movie is really fascinating to me, on this rewatch at least, because technically this movie is a drag film. Our main character is a male dressing up as a woman, and he performs on stage. And I find that to be a very relevant subject, and something I believe that should be celebrated, the drag scene, in my opinion. And this movie is really fascinating to watch with that in mind, because our main character, he switches back and forth between our woman impersonator character and then who he truly is, who is a thief, and who is trying to make as much money and also get back at the people who have ruined his life. Because in the beginning of the film, we get all of this setup where we get a flashback, and I'll talk about this more later, but there's a lot of silent film influences in this film that I had noticed. But in the beginning of the film, we get your typical silent film bubble above one of our characters when he is recalling the memory of when his parents died, and we're sort of getting a chronicle of what those events were and what led up to that. And after that, we get an amazing performance by our main character, who is played by Kazuo Hasegawa, who is a pretty major actor at this time, or had been for a while by this film shooting. And while he is performing on stage, he is scanning the crowd pretty subtly, and is able to track down where the 3 corrupt men are that he is trying to get revenge on. And we get a really great zoom in on each of them, sort of in a, I guess, foreshadowing of Lady Snowblood when they do the intense zoom ins on villains. We get that in this film. And we are given the backstories of each of these three men who contributed to the rape of our character's mother and also the death of his father on top of the death of his mother. So it was really terrible circumstances for this character, and he got traumatized, and he's been training ever since. It's very, I wouldn't say reminiscent of Lady Snowblood, because I believe the manga had come out after this film had come out. I will probably revisit that fact and figure out for sure, but I'm pretty sure that Lady Snowblood came a year or two after this, and then Lady Snowblood, the movie, I believe was 1968, 1969. I've already discussed it on my channel, so I will not be covering it in the series, but this film would make a very great double feature with Lady Snowblood for those sort of parallels that you will see in the cinematography and also the storyline of the backstories and also our main character, everything with that. But what's really fascinating about this film is that this is directly responding to the conventions that Ballad of Narayama had done by Keisuke Kinoshita. And if you remember with that film, the visual style for that is very kabuki-like. It's very stage focused. And all of our characters are in front of the camera and they're going in and out from the different directions of the camera. And it's a lot more a mix of that style, this film is, and it also combines the documentary style that Kaneto Shindo had done, which I talked about earlier with The Naked Island. And on top of that, we also have the very showy, visual, deliberate style that Kurosawa was using in his films. So we have all three of these styles sort of blending together throughout this film, but for the most part it is the more Ballad of Narayama cinematography. A lot more of the kabuki. People enter stage right, people enter stage left, they interact. They leave the room, they leave the house, sometimes they come in a different way, and it's a lot less focused on individual characters. And another point of this is that this movie is all about the kabuki theater, and I think that is something that is really interesting about this film, because I had listened to I had watched the interview with Tony Raines, who is one of the best scholars on Japanese film. I find him to be really knowledgeable and just great to listen to. He's very informative, and he's one of the few sort of contributors to these boutique releases that I actively seek out that release if I see that Tony Raines has done an interview, and especially if he has done an audio commentary. But for this release here by Criterion, he did do the interview for this, and it's about 15 minutes max or so, at least 10 minutes, so it's a good amount of time. But with him, it's very substantive and substantive and also comprehensive. So that small amount of time is going to be packed chock full of really great tidbits and information. And this sort of comparison between this film and Ballad of Narayama was brought up by Tony Raines, and that got my mind going before I'd watched the film, and there was so much to sort of glean from that and to make connections to, because this is something that I find just really fascinating about film, and I've talked about it a million times before about my jigsaw puzzle, where each puzzle in the jigsaw puzzle, where each piece is a film, and the artwork within that piece, the different colors, the composition, all of that, and also the shape, All of that is sort of the um, metaphor for the director, the actors, sort of the different styles that is used. It could also signify the adaptation that it is adapting, or the story that it is adapting. There's a lot of different things to connect between this film and Ballad of Narayama. And I find that to be one of the most rewarding parts of film, which I've talked about many times, and I just described it. But this film and Ballad of Narayama, watch them together also. I guess do a triple feature. Well, I guess do a 2-day double feature. Maybe, I don't know, it's up to you. But doing a double feature with Ballad of Narayama first and then this film would be very exciting and rewarding, I think. And also, watching An Actor's Revenge first and then Lady Snowblood, I find that to be a really exciting double feature. If anybody does this double feature idea, please let me know, because I would love to hear how it went. But one thing that is really cool about this film is the main star of this film, Kazuo Hasegawa. This is his 300th film, because this movie, before it goes into the sort of behind the scenes and sort of the explanation of what is going on, we get a subtitle in the beginning of the film that just says, this film is dedicating this film to Kazuo Hasegawa and his milestone of reaching 300 films. And this is a celebration of him, and they dedicate the movie to him. And he is absolutely amazing in this film. He is absolutely fascinating to watch. I find that he is really dynamic with every single actor on screen. We have a character who is played by Yoshi Kato, who is a very typecasted actor, because he was always playing sort of the wiser old man and wiser, or at least older fellow partner of our main characters in many different films. I believe he's in a couple of Kurosawa's films. I would have to look it up, but I've seen him many places, and that's why I know his name. But he is sort of working with our main character, our thief character, to try and rob our people as effectively as possible, and also to help him on his quest for vengeance, or for at least revenge. And it's really interesting to watch Kazuo work with Yoshi and also the other actors on screen, because when he's talking with his partner, his sort of confidant, he is very sort of blunt. He's very quick. He talks in a much deeper voice, and when somebody walks in, he completely changes. He changes his posture. He changes his voice to a much higher one, because he is impersonating a female. And I find that just to be really interesting to watch, because there are many actors who can do that, but with the way that this movie is shot in its kabuki-like way, and it's very long shots, it's not cutting back and forth, so it's holding on these characters that you are watching, and people are coming in and out of frame, and this guy is changing as people come into frame before he even knows that they have crossed into the frame. And I find that to be just really cool. I really enjoy sort of the cinematography of this film and how these actors are interacting with each other because of the way that this movie is being filmed in the kabuki style. And what's really interesting about this film is that this is an adaptation of an older story. I'm not sure what the origins are, but Tony Raines barely touches on it. So I'm not really too sure about it, and I was writing down everything he was saying, so I didn't get it all. But what's really fascinating is that this is not the first adaptation of that story. There was a different one back in the 1930s, and guess who the main star was, who was playing the female impersonator slash thief, Kazuo Hasegawa, the same main lead in the 1963 film, An Actor's Revenge. He was also in the original adaptation of this film, which was... sorry, I want to make sure it didn't cut off on me. People were worried about him doing the same role because he had done it 20 years before in his 20s. Or, yeah, in the 30s, he was in his 20s. I apologize. And so 30 years later, in the 60s, they make this other film, or they adapt the story again. And the casting director was like, oh my gosh, like, it would be amazing if we could get him back because he's really good in this role. He just completely changes his demeanor on a drop of a dime. And the casting director brought him in and asked him, like, hey, are you comfortable doing this? He was like, I have no issues with it. And he said he had no issues with it. And sure enough, he began doing the line readings and started acting in the film. And everybody was like, yeah, we should not have doubted him for a second. And I have not seen the original 1930s version. I did not even know there was a earlier adaptation of this work than this one. Before I had seen, or until I prepared for this video, and I was just surprised that there was just so much behind the scenes that I was just completely unaware of, because again, I hadn't seen this film for a very long time, so it's very interesting to think of it, think of all these things that were completely hidden, and seeing how the 60s adaptation, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's really interesting that there's just so much behind the scenes that I did not know of, and this is why I love studying film, because you slowly learn about stuff, and as you rewatch movies and watch more movies that you have not already seen, it is really interesting to see all the different connections and what you will discover as you watch films. And the next review that I'm going to film tonight, I think I have found the best example of that puzzle piece theory that I have. And I'm really excited to share that, but I'm going to move a little faster now. There are a lot of silent film influences in this film. I was really surprised because I own both of the Kinoshita silent film sets. The first one they did was what is it called? Pioneers of African American cinema is the first one. And the other one is the Early Woman Filmmakers set. And I've seen all of the early African American cinema films, and I've seen about half of the Woman Filmmakers one. And the main reason for that is because I have next to no knowledge of silent films. But after going through 1.5 of those sets, I was really struck by all of the sort of nods to silent cinema in this film. And one of which is the bubbles that I mentioned earlier above our characters. This was something that was in about every single silent film that I saw, and the Early Women's Filmmakers box set especially, because our characters would be talking. It's a silent film, so we don't have dialogue, or at least audio, and they will be talking, a bubble will appear above them, and you'll see the scene that they are talking about. And then the title cards come up, and they explain what's going on screen. And this movie had a lot of those bubbles going on. Mainly the first one that we see in the opening shots of the film. But we also have a lot of over-the-top expressions during really heightened sequences, or at least heightened emotional moments and heightened drama. And this happens when we see a character getting killed by our thief character, who uses his confidant, who is an older man. He's more trusting, and he always invites one of the wealthy merchants who are visiting the Kabuki Theater. And he's like, hey, like, I live, just over there. Like, can you come follow me tonight and, and guide me home? Like, I would love to talk with you, and I have a business proposal, and whatever way that they can trick them to come outside of the sort of, not town limits, but outside of prying eyes, outside of the eyes of the public. And so our older character starts leading our target out, and our thief character would come in and they're like, oh, hey, you're like one of the woman characters in the film. Like, oh, like, you were great in this, performance. And then they notice that this person in front of them is somebody who is very serious. They are ready to duel, basically, because he just pulls his sword out. He takes his samurai sword out and is facing them, and one of the most famous shots of the film is the one behind, which you can sort of see here. My pointer finger is showing where the wall of the sort of estate is, and you see a body sort of here. See if I right there is a body, and there's a scene, and this is an early scene of a death. And during the scene, we have our characters all lined up in a very intense stare down, and every time this happens in this film, not only just there, but throughout the rest of the film, we have our main character stabbing the guy or cutting him down, and it's always really high-pitched music, and on top of that, you have really over-the-top expressions, where it's just like, Pwah! And they get killed, and they fall down, and you get the awesome shots of the blood on the snow, because it is a winter film. This is happening during snowy days, so it's a really fascinating sort of connection to make with this film, because I was not thinking about silent films at all while watching this movie. But when Tony Raines was talking about the connection, I had that in mind when I was watching the film. I was like, ooh, let's try to find all the silent film nods. And those were two that I had found. And there's a third one that I really especially loved, is the framing of the camera, because the framing of the camera is all about, at least in silent films, it's about using space effectively, because they could not have dozens of cameras around the set filming every angle. Back then, they did not have the most robust camera equipment. So they had this giant camera that had to be held on a big tripod, and they would press go, and they could not move it. So this film uses a lot of that with the kabuki aspects, where our director, Kan Ichikawa, he is effectively using space by having the camera somewhat far away and having characters come in and out of the shot to interact with our main characters and to keep the action going. And this happens throughout the entirety of the film, but it is mixed in with the really exciting, fun shots that Kurosawa really popularized in the 50s. And I found that to be just really fun. I did not expect there to be anything silent film related in this review, but here we are. Really exciting. But what is really cool about this film is that we have two really interesting co-stars, one of which I did not see at all, and I don't know how that happened, because Tony Raines was really talking about this guy and I somehow missed him. But first, we have Yoshi Kato, who is somebody I did see. He plays the older character, the older confidant of Kazuo Hasegawa's character, which some reason I did not write down his name. But this character is somebody I've seen before in one of my favorite films of all time, which I think I will cover for this series, as I've gone back and forth on it, because I haven't talked about it on the channel at all. But the film we are talking about is Tampopo by Juzo Itami. And this is a 1985 film, and it stars Yoshikado in a supporting role. And that role is the leader of the homeless camp. And he is the to explain, there's a homeless camp that our characters visit at one point, and they are seeking sort of the final few nuggets of advice that our main character needs to learn in order to effectively run a ramen shop. And this character, Tempopo is her name, she goes with her friends who have volunteered to help her on her quest to become the best ramen shop in Tokyo. And she goes to this homeless group, and the main guy is Yoshi Kato, and he is playing the leader, and he is telling her all these stories about making sure that you cook in a very simple yet elegant way. And while he is giving her all of this advice, we get a really great scene of Tempopo's son going with one of the homeless people to go learn how to cook an omelet, and sort of using the advice that Yoshikado's character is giving Tempopo in order to give sort of this really great presentation of a pretty simple dish, an omelet. And we get, I don't want to go down too far into Tempopo, but I really enjoyed seeing this guy. I knew him from somewhere, and it wasn't until I looked him up and I was like, oh my god, he's that guy from Tempopo. And I was so excited to see him. But who I'm more excited to see than any of them is one of my favorite actors from Japan, who is Shintaro Katsu. I think that's how you say his last name, Katsu, maybe Katsu. It's one or the other, and I apologize if I'm wrong. But he is in this film, and if you don't know him, he is the main star of a 26 movie film series called Zatoichi. He is in this film also, and I had no idea because I still haven't seen him. I was listening to the Tony Raines interview and was writing down all my notes that I wanted to discuss, and I was like, oh, he's talking about Shintaro Katsu, and I looked up and I was like, yeah, that's him. Okay, cool. I have what he looks like in my head, because in Zatoichi, he always has his eyes closed and is always scrunching up his face. He's a very comedic character in Zatoichi, except when he becomes deadly. When he goes full Zatoichi, as me and CultFlixFix24 always joked about during our film review series, all about that series and going movie by movie. Shameless plug there. But I did not see him this watch. And I was really upset by that because I really like Shintaro Katsu. He's a little bit weird in the behind the scenes of Zatoichi. Won't comment on that any further, but I wish I saw him. I think I must have missed it somehow. I don't know, but he's in it. If you're about to go see this film, keep your eye out for him and let me know. Take a picture, send it to me so I can see him. But it is really interesting that he's in this film because he and his brother, I can't remember his name, but he and his brother were a very popular producer, actor, sort of team. And they were always producing each other's films, and one of which, I guess I've spoiled it by hesitating, but a series I will be covering for this YouTube series, Shintaro Katsu produced Lone Wolf and Cub. Cat's out of the bag, I am doing every movie in the Lone Wolf and Cub series, and that is one of the projects that they were starring and producing for each other. Another one is Zatoichi. His brother even comes on in movie 2 and I believe movie 4 to try and take Zatoichi down. It's really fascinating sort of actor team-ups because the brothers in real life, and on top of that, the brothers and the various movies that they're in. So it's really fascinating to see him in this because I did not know there was any connection to either of them with Kan Ichikawa. I don't really know anything about Kan Ichikawa, the director, but I'm definitely intrigued on how they are connected. Shintaro Katsu and Kan Ichikawa. But I am losing steam. I think I've talked about everything here, but this movie is really great. I gave it a 4 stars on Letterboxd, but I think that more has to do with the fact that I was not as much in the mood to watch it as I have been with the other Japanese films that I've reviewed, but I'm really excited to go on because this did not crash yet. I hope it doesn't crash again. If it does, I'm moving on. I don't know. But thank you all so much for watching, and please have a great rest of the evening.